There you go.
Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, Director of Curatorial and Educational Affairs for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial.
And I'm Elena Noland. I'm the collections manager.
Live from my library here in Philadelphia.
Today we're going to talk about submarines because the newest New Jersey, who is a submarine that is currently in construction.
Why is today National Submarine Day?
I don't know.
Anybody behind the camera know?
Today was the official release of the first submarine that the Navy purchased.
Our Navy?
The United States Navy, yes.
So USS Holland
Yes.
was commissioned today?
Nope, it was
Released.
the first time they saw it to decide whether or not they wanted to buy it.
Okay.
American Submarine Day is on the day that they did buy it.
Oh.
Interesting.
Do you want to talk about Holland for a second?
Sure.
Go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
Excellent. The first modern American submarines were all called Holland Boats. They were all designed by a man named Holland. He designed a series that got increasingly better in the early 1900s. One of these boats, Teddy Roosevelt sailed on, and from that day on, submariners have always been given hazard duty pay, even when they're not in a war zone.
For good reason.
So, Holland was not the first submarine in American service, just the first modern one. Can you tell us a little bit about earlier submarines?
They were boats that you didn't want to be on. They were 1864 was the first pre-modern submarine, I suppose, for lack of a better term.
The first one to sink an enemy ship, at least.
Yes.
There was one that tried a little bit earlier than that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's another museum ship you kind of can visit. Can't go in it. Sorry, guys.
Museum boat.
Boats. Yeah.
Why do we call them boats?
Submarines are called boats because the earliest submarines were carried to vessels that in a number of jobs have replaced actual ships.
Yes.
So before Huntley, there was the fact that he could hand crank to move the submerged barrel and had a screw in the top that if he got under the bottom of this ship and caused it to flood. Wooden ships don't have internal compartmentalization like modern ships. How many internal compartments does Battleship New Jersey have?
About 1,100.
So that's a lot of watertight integrity there.
3 false bottoms. So
And a typical British ship of the line had
no false bottoms.
no false bottoms and 0 watertight compartments on the inside. So if you're able to punch through the hole, it didn't really work. So then we get to the Civil War, and both the Union and the Confederacy are trying to design submarines. I'm going to start with the Union submarine because oar-powered?
Seems like a flaw in the design.
Yeah, you see, oars have to go through the hull of the ship, so they had theoretically the water would not get in. In practice,
The water got in.
yeah, believe it or not, the Confederacy had more luck with their submarine, although they also suffered more casualties with it. The Confederate submarine had handles on it, so the crew inside, there were 7 or 8 guys in there, could hand crank this thing. So it was hand powered and out and sea. Well, Huntley is one of those if at first you don't succeed stories because they put it in the water, it worked, they tested it, it sank, got a crew together. They tested it was working, it stopped working, it sunk, it killed him, it killed the whole crew. So if at first you don't succeed, try again. They tried a 3rd time. A guy named Dixon takes command. He trains a crew, they go out, they use it, they're able to implant a mine, which an explosive on the end of a spar that was sticking out of the front of this submarine, into the side of one of the Union blockading ships, a sloop of war named the Housatonic, and that whole thing, internal compartmentalization, this mine explodes, so killed the
Deep.
No, they were just below the surface of the water. Like I said before, they were submersibles, not true submarines. So
And they were used more for coastal defense than anything. They were kind of like monitors that submerged more.
exactly. The earliest submarines, and even
One sub?
How deep can they go?
No, we just answered it.
Okay,
You were
sort of.
attention.
But we're talking about coastal defense.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, not deep. They don't really. They hardly even submerge all the way. If they do, they're probably in danger of actually sinking. So they were basically just very low profile surface craft.
So Hunley proved the concept that submarines are 30 or 40 years. Then we come back to Holland, and Holland starts the development of modern submarines that progresses and just submarine force in the world. They also had the largest navy in the world. So rather than rely on submarines, they relied on their line of battleships to defend England. Their navy was twice the size of any other navy. Well, they're large enough to directly counter the Royal Navy. So instead, they realized Great Britain's an island. They can.
Blockading is good.
It's not a self-sufficient island. So if you can blockade it with submarines, you can starve them out and get them out of the war. Great Britain is blockading Germany with their surface ships, keeping supplies from getting in, but Germany's a land power. So they could, in theory, hold out a long time. By 1918, they were basically just eating turnips. So the blockade did work. The German blockade of England really put the pressure on until they started sinking neutral vessels, and that brought the United States into the war. And then we had enough ships to supply Great Britain. These submarines were still largely coastal. So they were not going out into the open ocean and finding ships. They were hanging out around the British Isles in the English Channel near the coast.
And surprise, we'll see this tactic, although taken out into the deep water, will happen again, World War II, which people are a little bit more familiar with.
What is it that makes the Germans take their tactic into the open ocean in World War II?
Besides the fact that Hitler didn't want to put any money.
So airplanes operating from land bases could cover the coastal areas. Even submerged submarines in relatively clear water.
There's two different kinds of sonar. You have passive sonar and active sonar. So for any of you that have seen like the hump road, the Russian accent, very astounding. So it wasn't super reliable. A very, very, very early form of passive sonar can actually be seen on the cruiser Olympia. She still has her, I can't remember what it's called.
Pesner oscillator?
Yes, the oscillator. Yes, that is what it is. And it was basically just detecting vibrations coming back. They weren't sending anything out.
In fact, by the war, they had built the largest conventional powered submarine, the I-400 class, which could even carry aircraft. The French had some large submarines, Sarkouf, her dives in the end.
To the surprise of few.
Yeah, well, the surprising thing is she probably wasn't sunk by the enemy. It was a submarine operating in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And it was slow to dive, so it got helped. The theory on that is that American aircraft patrolling the Caribbean saw her, thought it was a German U-boat because she didn't respond to American recognition signals and bombed her, even though she was operating with the Free French, who were our allies.
Not great.
Nope. But Germany and the United States each had large submarine forces, and they were both fighting island nations, and they both tried the same tactic to varying degrees of success. that are unarmed, protected by a group of armed naval vessels. And we might do another video about convoys at some point in the future. So in order to break through that convoy, a single ship is going to have a hard time. But a group of U-boats...
To great success for
Yep.
a great deal of the war.
Well, every time somebody new entered the war, they had to relearn the convoy system.
Yeah.
So even though we learned this lesson in World War I, when the war started, Great Britain wasn't using the convoy system. Sunk at that time individually along the coast of the United States where they should have been safe. By late war, all of our ships were in convoys, and our groups of escorts, escort carriers, and destroyer escorts that
Range
were
further.
on distance. And because they had aircraft carriers now in the mid-Atlantic, they had aircraft there, and aircraft, of course, are really good at any submarine warfare.
But even late in the war, there were some German U-boats that got close.
Exterior hull of the boat, which could absorb active sonar. And that technology was gobbled up by the Allies post-war, and that is a blockade of Japan primarily using submarines. So some of the first ships, Japanese surface ships, capital ships, and sometimes they got lucky with that, but they weren't really focusing on that. They were focusing on the Japanese merchant marine. Japan's an empire. They're an island. They aren't self-sufficient. So their whole purpose for getting into World War II was to capture all the resources they don't have to Japan on ships. All the supplies for their troops who are in this ring of defensive islands around their home islands has to be taken in ships. It wasn't getting the resources they needed to prosecute the war effort anymore.
And our production of submarines was through the roof by the end of World War II. I believe it was Electric Boat Company by 1945 was building like 3 submarines a month or something. Something ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. We had well over 300 boats that fought during the war, and we were building them into the 400s at the end.
And there are some World War II boats still around.
Indeed.
One of them's even a German one.
Yeah, so I've got my copy of Final Patrol right here. There's about a dozen left. So according to Final Patrol, which is the story of all of these Drum, where's Drum located?
She is in Alabama.
Mobile, Alabama, and she is still open as of today, which is March 17th.
And she has an incredible...
Sides. Do you remember where Silver Sides is?
Is she in Texas?
No, that's Kavala.
Hmm.
I don't remember where she is off the top of my head. Could somebody off camera find that for me?
Please hold, he says.
Muskegon, Michigan?
Oh,
Oh, really? Michigan.
never been to her. We've got Kavala.
That's the one in Texas.
That's the one in Texas.
In Galveston?
We've got Cobia,
Yay, in Manitowoc.
the most recent one we visited
Yeah.
in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. They are closed for at least the next 3 weeks, and they've even had to send a lot of staff home there. Let's see. We've got USS Croker. I haven't been to her. Where's she located? If you're noticing a theme,
When we are allowed to have road trips again.
and next on our list is Bofin, the Pearl Harbor Avenger. She is currently docked in Pearl Harbor,
Yeah.
and as of this morning, she was still open, but the National Park Service has just closed down their sites in the area, so it might be a matter of time. Next up, we have USS Ling. She's been closed for several years now. She's in Hackensack, New Jersey. There's a group trying to restore her currently. She suffered some vandalism the other year in Battleship Cove, Massachusetts. And
I've not been. You've been.
I have been, but I was this big when I went.
She's part of our next road trip.
And Battleship Cove, they're only open on weekends right now, I believe.
If that.
Maybe.
Yeah, but I think so because they turned their water back on.
As of this.
As of this morning, just open
Okay.
on weekends, which is their normal winter operating hours. And then we've got Batfish. Batfish was one of the cornfield.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. Okay. We've got Bakuna.
My boat.
And Bakuna is, I have my Bakuna hat here.
She's here in Philly too.
She's flying the quarantine flag right now, and she is closed for at least the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. At least another solid weekend.
They're making plans to artificially reef her so you can dive on her in the future. We have Pampanito, which is out in California, one of the sands. Which sand is it? I can never keep them
I
straight.
don't remember.
San Francisco?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. I've not been to
You were
her,
about to sing.
but what's the funny submarine movie?
The pink.
No, not the pink submarine movie.
Down Periscope.
Down
Down
Periscope. I believe that's
I haven't
Pampanito
seen-
and Down
I haven't
Periscope.
seen Down Periscope in so long.
Worth a rewatch. If you guys are stuck at home, Down Periscope's a good funny one. Maybe we'll give some submarine movie recommendations at the end of this.
Oh, we have a comment. We have a question from Jack
Yeah.
about the current status of the launch of the new New Jersey. We'll get to it, Jack. I promise.
Let's see. USS Razorback
She's in Arkansas.
in Arkansas. That's the one that's in Arkansas.
She is, because the Razorbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got Torsk in Baltimore. They're
Yeah.
leased. Requin out in
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Don't know Requin.
I haven't heard about the,
I would assume that Carnegie Mellon is closed.
but she's with the Museum of Industry in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Not sure about whether she's open.
Science Center, the Pittsburgh Science Center. And then we've got,
Closed. 505.
they are closed?
They're close.
Okay. And we've got the U-505, which I can't remember.
Yeah.
We have a YouTube video about
We do have a YouTube video about it, so go scrolling back. It was one of the earlier ones I feel we did, yes?
it. Summer.
But yeah, so we had this, it was given to us by Edmund Scientific in North Jersey, and it remained in storage for a very long time. So only in the past year have we brought it to the ship. We actually put a hole into the roof of our visitor center and stuck it down through the hole so you can actually look at the battleship through the periscope. And as far as we know, it is the only full-size Japanese periscope on display. An appraisal of it when Edmund Scientific gave it to us. So using the information that they had, we were able to backtrack to figure out which boat were pretty.
Submarine force as well. And the Soviet Union has captured a lot of German scientists and some of their submarine technology. The Soviet Union is in much the same shape as Nazi Germany in that they don't have a large surface navy, and they're now opposed to the Western allies. So they go the same route as Germany, thinking if they get into war with the United States, they're going to have to disrupt convoys to Europe. Without a surface navy, that means they have to use submarines to do it. Now we're into the Cold War, and we get our last museum submarine in the United States, which is USS Nautilus up in Groton, Connecticut. The only nuclear-powered submarine that is currently on display.
Which I also haven't seen.
It's been a while since I've been there. Let's see. She was the first nuclear submarine built. All American submarines now are nuclear. Some European submarines have gone back to the diesel-electric concept of World War II, which are quieter, although they have shorter range. So there's countries which are using them.
Oh, Albacore.
You missed Albacore.
I don't think Albacore was in the book. Where's Albacore? Yeah, she's small.
Teensy.
She was the first to do the teardrop shape on a submarine.
Right, and where is she?
She is
On
in New
display.
Hampshire.
Up in New Hampshire.
Kittery, Maine.
Oh, Maine.
That
No,
is not New
that's where she was built. Sorry.
Yeah, so you know there's a sub
she
in there.
is in Portsmouth.
Okay. So not a World War II boat, but another museum ship.
Mhm.
Yay. And I would assume that she's also not open at the moment.
I'm not sure what if their museum is to the Navy or not. So let's see.
Nuclear submarine.
Nuclear submarines can stay at sea for 3 to 6 months at a time. They make their own air. They, of course, are making their own steam to power the ship. They go out, they go underwater, and they stay out for a long time.
Really, their biggest limit is how much food they can carry.
Diesel electric boats are quieter. They think about hybrids and
Hybrid cars, he means.
what other sort of hybrids are there?
Any kind of hybrid.
Anyway, these electric boats are still in use today by some countries, especially countries that are doing coastal defense. They don't need long range for that. And a diesel electric boat is basically, when it's on battery power, a hole in the water. You can't hear the thing. Some modern countries have even come up with liquid oxygen systems that they don't have to go to the surface to get air periodically, so they can continue to run their engines while fully submerged. Now, they're just closed for the winter, too far north. So, that gets us to the modern day. Let's talk about our new exhibit and the newest New Jersey.
Yeah, so we do have a new exhibit that we opened in January. It's about all 3 ships called New Jersey, of which we are the second one. The first one was a pre-World War I battleship, or dreadnought, pre-dreadnought.
Pre-dreadnought battleship, yeah.
Part of the Great White Fleet. She was sunk in the 1920s during bomb testing. She's off of North Carolina. I believe that is a quick overview of the exhibits. If you go to our Facebook, hopefully we'll have that up later today. Someone remind me.
It's not going to be me.
But the newest New Jersey is actually not finished, and she is a nuclear fast attack submarine. She is SSN 796. She will not be long 2021 now, is what they're saying, June or July.
Okay, so that is a delay from normal.
Yeah. But I don't know if some of that maybe has to do with the new class of submarine that they're getting ready to start to work on.
Oh, yeah, the 12 Columbia-class boats. They're going to replace the Ohios in launching ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
And that program is going to cost something like $60 billion?
Something like that. Something insane.
$60 million?
No, it was billions.
Billions?
It was.
Nuts.
Yeah. But yeah, so the current class that is being built are the Virginia class, which, funnily enough, is also the same class as the first battleship New Jersey.
It's a teensy model of one.
That are building these. They're actually building them together. So it's Electric Boat Company in Connecticut and Newport News in Virginia, and they build the other segments and basically put them all together, and then they are alternating which yard does like the shakedown cruises, where we are up to, we've got 3 blocks of Virginias, and they're starting on the 4th. There's quite a large number of them. I believe the first one was launched in like 2004-ish, but they're predicting them to be in service through the 2070s. They should each have a life of 30 years, which is about the saving measures was to put a lot of their internal communication devices are kind of off the shelf. We've had a really good relationship with.
Let's talk about how submarines relate to the Battleship New Jersey. Does Battleship New Jersey have any inherent capacity to defend against submarines?
Not really. There's on the sides. We rely on planes and then our escort vessels to keep submarines away.
Nixie.
Yeah,
we do have a Nixie.
There's a hole that they cut into the back of the ship where the World War II crane equipment used to be, where you could play out on a cord, basically a noisemaker. So battleships with their 4 propellers are very loud. Modern submarines, many of them have acoustic sensors in them, so they can home on to a sound source and hit that, disable the boat. So we play Nixie out the stern. It makes a lot of noise, simulates a ship, and that could defeat acoustic torpedoes. We also had a helicopter pad added, so we could carry an anti-submarine aircraft. Let's see. Submarines have, by and large, replaced battleships. Battleships were once the premier anti-surface ship in the Navy. Nothing else but another battleship could touch them, and they could sink anything up to including other battleships. the invention of submarines saw a type of ship that these couldn't touch, that could sink them. Initially, they were coastal defense boats, and so first they were replacing the first proto-battleships, the Monitors and the short-ranged pre-dreadnoughts. Well, eventually they even replaced the full-size battleships. So now the Navy no longer has battleships. No Navy in the world does. But most navies, even smaller powers, have submarines, which can sink enemy warships pretty much impotently.
And they work in conjunction with aircraft carriers, which are the other anti-surface ship.
Turns out that submarines are very good at anti-submarine warfare also. So you can escort some of your surface ships with submerged ships.
Yes.
So,
Brings us up to present day.
yeah, we've even gone into the future a little bit. So, new content. We plan on reaching out about every day at noon.
Nope, one.
One? Every day at noon, which is, what's the time zone after us?
Central.
Noon Central Time. 1 o'clock here on the East Coast. We'll put some new stuff up every day. I'm not sure what we'll do tomorrow, but I'll see you then.